This is a calm Italian bedtime story. Let your eyes close and simply listen. Because the first sound was never meant to be heard. It was meant to arrive after everything else had softened. Long before these walls broke open to the sky, before columns learned how to fall without noise, before names mattered more than gestures, sound lived closer to the ground, not above you, around you. The night settles here, the same way it always has, not suddenly, not dramatically. Stone releases warmth, one breath at a time. Dust loosens without moving. The air grows heavier, but not oppressive, just present. You are not standing in a ruin. You are standing in a room that forgot it was once inside. The shape of it is still there. The corners remember where sleep used to gather. The wall remembers where a hand once rested while speaking softly. Nothing here echoes. Echoes belong to places that expect to be answered. This place does not. If a sound appears, it does not travel far. It folds inward. It becomes smaller. That is how the night protected sleep here. The first lullabies were not songs. They were adjustments. A voice lowered itself without instruction. A rhythm slowed without permission. A breath lengthened because the body asked for it. No one said, "Now you sleep." Sleep arrived because nothing was pushing against it anymore. You can almost sense it, not as memory, as familiarity, a repetition that feels older than language. In these rooms, a child did not lie down alone. They were accompanied by the sound of someone staying, a presence that did not leave once the eyes closed, a presence that remained long enough for the body to believe it. The floor beneath you holds that belief. It was shaped by generations of bare feet moving slowly at night, by careful steps taken in darkness without light, by the instinct to know where not to place weight. This is how sound was taught restraint. Above you, the sky is open now. But once, it wasn't. Once, the ceiling held smoke and warmth and the low murmur of life settling. Once, oil lamps stayed lit, not to illuminate, but to reassure. A small flame is a sound, if you know how to listen. It hums without volume. It steadies the room. Somewhere in this villa, a child shifted in their sleep. Not waking, just rearranging themselves inside rest. And the voice adjusted, not louder, not softer, closer. This is where the lullaby lived, not in melody, but in distance. A mother did not sing to the child. She sang around them, so the sound would not land, so it would not startle, so it would not ask to be followed. The words were not important. They changed constantly. Sometimes they were nonsense. Sometimes fragments of older phrases. Sometimes nothing more than breath shaped gently. What mattered was that the sound did not claim attention. It released it, and she knew this without learning it, because she had been held by the same kind of sound from another voice, in another room, in another time, that felt exactly like this one. The Roman mother did not consider herself ancient. She considered herself ordinary. She moved through the house without thinking of history. She did not imagine ruins. She imagined tomorrow, the bread that would be baked, the water that would be carried, the child who would wake and demand the day without patience. But now it was night, and night required something else. Her gestures slowed without decision. She did not rush the end of the day. She did not close it sharply. She let it loosen. Her hand brushed the child's hair once, not repeatedly, not soothingly, just enough to say, "I am still here." Then the sound returned, low, circular, unresolved. The lullaby did not end. It simply stopped being necessary, and when it did, silence took over seamlessly. Not an absence, a continuation. That is the silence you are standing inside now. Not empty, finished. The walls learned how to hold it. They learned that sleep does not need to be guarded loudly. It needs to be trusted. Centuries passed. Voices changed shape. Languages replaced each other. Roofs collapsed. But this particular quiet did not disappear. It settled deeper. It waited. And now, without asking, it is offering itself again. You do not need to imagine the sound clearly. That would be too sharp. Instead, let the idea of it remain unfocused. Like a rhythm you cannot tap, but your breathing follows anyway. The lullaby was never meant to be remembered. It was meant to work, and it still does. Time did not pass here in lines. It moved in layers. One evening lay gently on top of another, each one leaving behind a faint impression, like fabric pressed together for centuries. This is how domestic sound survives history, not by being preserved, by being repeated until it becomes invisible. After that mother, there was another. She did not know the lullaby as something learned. She knew it as something that arrived when the room required it. Her voice found the same register without effort. Her breath slowed in the same places. Her pauses fell where silence had always waited. She did not imitate. She continued. The child did not recognize the sound as ancient. They recognized it as safe. Safety has no era. In these houses, night work was quiet work. Hands moved without friction. Clay touched clay. Wood met wood. Metal learned how not to ring. The home trained itself to reduce impact because sleep was fragile, because rest was necessary, because the day would ask for everything again. And in the center of it all, the voice remained. Sometimes it hummed, sometimes it counted without numbers, sometimes it repeated a single phrase until the phrase lost meaning and became rhythm. The words changed with time. Latin softened, vowels stretched, consonants learned to rest, but the function of the sound did not. It was never entertainment, never performance. It was containment. The voice did not try to fill the room. It shaped the edges. Outside, life continued. Footsteps passed on stone streets. Animals shifted in their sleep. Water moved where it always had. None of it intruded. The lullaby created a boundary without walls. This is what the ruins still remember. Not events, not dates. Pressure. The gentle pressure of a sound that said, "You do not have to stay alert anymore." Generations grew up inside this pressure. Some left, some returned. Some forgot the words, but kept the rhythm. When the empire thinned, when power moved elsewhere, when buildings began to open themselves to rain and sky, the lullaby did not leave with the soldiers. It stayed with the kitchens, with the inner rooms, with the women who rocked children while thinking about bread and tomorrow and the weight of water. They did not think of themselves as carriers of tradition. They thought of themselves as tired, and that tiredness shaped the sound more accurately than any rule could. When a voice is tired, it does not embellish. It simplifies. It chooses what matters and releases the rest. That is why these lullabies survived. They were already stripped down to necessity. The ruins you see now are quiet because they were trained to be. They once knew how to hold a sleeping child while the world shifted outside. They once knew that sleep was not escape. It was preparation. Even now, the air behaves differently here at night. It does not rush. It does not scatter. It lingers low, like breath held gently in the chest. If you listen closely, not with your ears, but with your body, you can sense where the sound used to sit. Near the floor, near the chest, never above the head. The lullaby never climbed. It stayed where the heart could feel it. Mothers changed. So did grandmothers. By the time the language became Italian, the sound had already decided what it would be. Soft vowels, rounded edges, a cadence that did not demand attention. In medieval houses, in Renaissance rooms, in narrow apartments with shutters and shared walls, the same rule applied. Night belonged to rest. Rest belonged to everyone. You do not wake a child abruptly in this lineage. You escort them. You walk beside sleep until it arrives on its own. That is the sound you are standing near. It is not loud enough to reconstruct. It is too wide for that. Instead, it behaves like temperature. It adjusts the room. Even now, your breathing has likely changed. Not because you decided to slow it, because nothing is asking it to stay alert. The lullaby is not present anymore, but its effect remains. This is how domestic sound defeats time, not by surviving intact, but by teaching rooms how to behave. And these ruins behave like a place that once knew how to let people sleep. At some point, the sound no longer needed a voice. This is not when it ended. This is when it changed form. The lullaby learned how to live without being sung. It settled into gestures first, a hand placed flat instead of gripping, a movement slowed by half without explanation, a pause taken before turning away from the bed. In Roman homes, the night had structure, not rules, rhythm. Oil lamps were adjusted lower than necessary. Doors were closed once, never twice. Footsteps learned where the stones would not echo. These were not decisions. They were inheritances. The child grew older. The lullaby followed them, but at a distance. It became the sound of water poured carefully. The scrape of a stool moved back without complaint. The fabric of a tunic folded instead of dropped. By adulthood, the sound no longer announced itself. It worked behind the body. Years later, that same child became a parent, and without realizing it, they lowered their voice at night. Not because someone told them to, because the walls expected it. This is how domestic sound embeds itself. It trains spaces first. People follow later. The ruins you see today were never meant to be silent monuments. They were meant to hold life quietly. Bedrooms faced inward. Courtyards absorbed sound. Walls were thick not for defense, but for rest. Sleep was understood as fragile, valuable, collective. A single loud movement could ripple through an entire household. So households learned restraint. This restraint is still present. Even now, when you walk among these stones at night, your steps naturally soften. You do not know why. Your body remembers before your mind does. There were nights of fear here too. Storms, illness, absence. On those nights, the lullaby did not disappear. It adapted. It became steadier, lower, less melodic. Sometimes it was only breath. Sometimes it was only presence. A mother sitting near the bed without moving. A grandmother counting breaths with her own. No words, just alignment. This was never about putting someone to sleep. It was about staying with them until sleep felt safe. That distinction matters. Centuries passed. The empire fractured. Languages braided. Borders moved. But night remained night. Children still resisted sleep. Adults still worried in the dark. Rooms still needed to be settled before rest could arrive. So the lullaby shifted again. It hid inside prayers, murmured without urgency. Inside stories told badly on purpose. Inside repetitive gestures that asked nothing in return. The ruins absorbed all of this. They did not discriminate between sacred and ordinary. They held it equally. When people stopped living here, the sound did not leave immediately. It lingered, like warmth in stone, long after the fire is gone. That is why these places feel different at night. Not haunted, prepared for rest, prepared for silence that is not empty, prepared for listening without expectation. If you stay long enough, you may notice something subtle. The absence of sharp edges, no sudden echoes, no harsh reflections. The space does not throw sound back at you. It receives it. This is learned behavior. It was taught over hundreds of nights, one child at a time. Eventually, even memory loosened. Names disappeared. Faces faded. But the lullaby had already done its work. It no longer needed to be remembered. It had trained the environment to finish the job on its own. That is why you can imagine it now. Not because you know the melody, but because your body understands the function. You do not need to hear it. You can feel where it would sit. Low, close, unhurried. Somewhere between breath and wall. Between stone and skin. This is not nostalgia. It is continuity. The same logic that moves through Italian nights today. The way voices drop after a certain hour. The way chairs are lifted, not dragged. The way lights are dimmed, but not extinguished. These are not habits. They are echoes, not of music, of care. Care repeated so many times, it became architecture. And now, as you stand here, awake, listening to something that is no longer audible, you are not interrupting the past. You are aligning with it. The lullaby does not return. It does not need to. It already did what it came to do. The ruins hold the rest. They hold the after. They hold the pause between days. They hold the permission to let your body follow the oldest instruction it knows, to stop listening outward and let the night finish the work. More Italian bedtime stories coming very soon. If you enjoyed this moment of calm, subscribe and like the video for more gentle storytelling.